Welcome to Innovation Pulse, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in clean tech and EVs. First, we will cover the latest news. The National Ignition Facility advances fusion yields but remains inefficient for grids, and Tesla's robotaxi service faces safety concerns over eased regulations and indistinguishable vehicle design. After this, we'll dive deep into the growing interest in geoengineering as a climate solution and its implications. The National Ignition Facility, NIF, at the U.S. Department of Energy has advanced its net positive fusion experiments, achieving yields of 5.2 and 8.6 megajoules, a notable increase from the 2022 breakthrough of 3.15 megajoules. This 2022 experiment was the first to generate more energy than it consumed, despite the significant 300 megajoules needed to power the lasers. While not yet efficient enough to feed energy back to the grid, these experiments prove controlled nuclear fusion is plausible. The NIF uses inertial confinement, where a diamond-coated fuel pellet is bombarded with 192 lasers until its nuclei fuse, releasing energy. In contrast, magnetic confinement relies on superconducting magnets to compress plasma. Although no magnetic confinement has achieved a net positive outcome yet, future projects aim to reach this goal. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has updated rules for autonomous vehicles, allowing United States-made models exemptions from certain safety standards. This aims to boost innovation and maintain leadership in vehicle technology. The changes focus on robotaxis for services like Tesla's upcoming fleet, exempting them from some reporting requirements. While this removes some data redundancies, it limits public access to information on incidents, especially for Tesla's full self-driving systems. Analysts suggest Tesla benefits most from these changes. Tesla plans to launch a ride-hailing service in Austin, Texas, using modified Model Y SUVs. Concerns arise about the lack of visible indicators distinguishing Tesla robotaxis from regular vehicles, unlike Waymo's clearly marked cars. Critics argue that these regulatory changes prioritize business interests over public safety by reducing transparency. And now, pivot our discussion towards the main clean tech topic.
Hey there, Innovation Pulse listeners. I'm Donna, and you're tuned into the show where we dissect the latest tech trends and their real-world impact. Today, we're diving into a pretty fascinating topic at the intersection of climate tech, Silicon Valley funding models, and what some might call technological escapism.
And I'm Yakov Lasker, ready to unpack this with you. Today, we're looking at an interesting phenomenon in the climate solutions space. Specifically, the growing push for geoengineering as a potential answer to our climate crisis, and whether that's distracting us from solutions we already have.
Geoengineering. Sounds very sci-fi, doesn't it? Like something out of a movie where scientists save the world by shooting stuff into the atmosphere.
It absolutely does, and that's part of its appeal, right? The idea that we can engineer our way out of climate change with these grand technological interventions, rather than making difficult economic and lifestyle changes. We're specifically looking at organizations like Silver Lining, which has been aggressively promoting solar radiation management strategies.
Okay, wait, solar radiation management? Let's break that down for our listeners who might not be familiar.
Sure thing. Basically, it's a set of proposed technologies that would reflect sunlight away from Earth to cool the planet. Things like marine cloud brightening, where you spray salt particles into clouds to make them more reflective, or stratospheric aerosol injection, which involves releasing particles into the upper atmosphere to block some incoming sunlight.
So instead of reducing emissions, we're talking about dimming the sun. That sounds ambitious.
Ambitious is one word for it. And this approach has intellectual roots in a philosophy called eco-modernism, which basically argues that human ingenuity and technological progress are the keys to solving environmental problems, not necessarily cutting back or changing how we live.
I've heard of eco-modernism, the Breakthrough Institute folks, right?
Exactly, and there's a direct connection here. Rachel Pritzker, who's a major backer of Silver Lining, actually chairs the board of the Breakthrough Institute. She's an heiress to the Pritzker family fortune and directs significant funding toward these speculative climate technologies.
Wait, so we're seeing wealthy tech investors behind this push? Tell me more about who's funding this geoengineering research.
It's largely Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and tech billionaires. Silver Lining gets significant backing from lower carbon capital and investors like Chris Sacca. And that funding environment shapes the solutions they prioritize. They're looking for disruptive, transformative technologies with that high-risk, high-reward venture capital model.
Makes sense. Silicon Valley loves a moonshot solution. So who's leading the charge at Silver Lining specifically?
The executive director is Kelly Wanzer, who came from the tech world. She previously led a data networking startup called Luminous Networks. She's now championing marine cloud brightening and other geoengineering approaches, lobbying for public investment and policy support.
So has Silver Lining actually conducted any of these experiments yet? Or is this all theoretical?
They've tried. They supported marine cloud brightening trials off the California coast with the University of Washington, but those experiments face significant pushback from local communities and environmental groups concerned about risks and governance issues. The trials were eventually halted.
I can imagine there would be concerns. I mean, we're talking about intentionally modifying Earth's climate systems, right? What kind of regulatory framework even exists for this?
That's a key issue. There are guidelines like the Oxford Principles on Geoengineering, established back in 2009, which emphasize transparency, public participation, accountability, and independent assessment before pursuing these kinds of inventions.
Let me guess. Critics say Silver Lining hasn't fully embraced these principles?
Bingo. Their approach has been criticized as overly technocratic and lacking sufficient attention to global equity and inclusive governance. But despite setbacks and criticisms, they've doubled down on lobbying efforts. In fact, in the 2024 election cycle, they spent $420,000 on lobbying, more than larger environmental groups like the World Resources Institute.
Wow, that's significant money for a relatively small organization. So they're really going all in on the policy influence game.
Absolutely. They've been pushing Congress and the Biden administration to create dedicated research programs for these geoengineering approaches, and they've gained significant media visibility. Wanzer has appeared on influential podcasts, and they've been covered by mainstream outlets like the BBC, New York Times, and Washington Post.
All right, so here's my question. What's wrong with researching all possible options? Shouldn't we investigate every tool in the toolkit to address climate change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Critics argue that this focus on speculative technologies creates what they call a moral hazard. By presenting the possibility of a technological quick fix, it reduces the pressure on policymakers and industries to pursue emissions reductions urgently.
So it's like saying, don't worry about cutting emissions now. We'll figure out how to engineer our way out of this later.
Exactly, and the problem is that we already have proven solutions that can be deployed immediately. Solar, wind, batteries, heat pumps, grid expansions, electric vehicles. These technologies exist. They're constantly improving, and they're increasingly cost-effective.
Right. And I'm guessing those solutions don't get the same level of excitement or funding from the Silicon Valley crowd because they're, what? Too boring? Too incremental?
You've got it? The Silicon Valley mindset tends to be skeptical of solutions that aren't disruptive or transformative in the venture capital sense. Grid modernization and energy efficiency improvements lack the glamour or novelty of geoengineering. But the IPCC and International Energy Agency reports emphasize that we already have the tools necessary to dramatically cut emissions within this critical decade.
Let's talk track record for a minute. How have previous eco-modernist technological fixes for climate change panned out?
Not great, honestly. If you look at their past enthusiasm for things like nuclear fission, carbon capture, algae biofuels, and advanced nuclear reactors, these all attracted substantial funding, media attention, and policy support. but have repeatedly failed to reach the necessary scales or cost reductions to make a significant impact on the climate crisis.
So there's a pattern here of chasing shiny technological solutions that don't ultimately deliver at scale.
Right. And meanwhile, boring old solar and wind have been steadily getting cheaper and more effective, to the point where they're now the most cost-effective forms of new electricity generation in most of the world, but they don't fit the disruptive innovation narrative.
I'm also thinking about another angle here, the whole governance question. If we actually deployed these geoengineering solutions at scale, who would control them? Who decides how much to cool the planet? It seems like it could create some serious geopolitical tensions.
That's a critical concern. Solar radiation management would have global effects, but could be deployed unilaterally by wealthy nations or even individuals. There's no international governance framework in place for this. And once deployed, these technologies might be difficult or impossible to stop without causing rapid warming.
Not to mention potential unintended consequences for weather patterns, agriculture, and ecosystems, right?
Absolutely. We simply don't know all the potential side effects of these interventions, and the people who would be most vulnerable to negative consequences are often those with the least say in the decision-making process.
So to sum up, we have organizations like Silver Lining promoting speculative geoengineering approaches that might never work at scale, might have dangerous side effects, and might create a false sense of security that reduces the urgency of emissions cuts. Meanwhile, we already have proven technologies like renewables and electrification that are ready to deploy right now.
That's the argument, yes. And it's important to note that time is really of the essence here. Every month of delay on climate action has real consequences for lives, ecosystems, and global stability. The concern is that these techno-optimist diversions, however well-intentioned, could cost us precious time that we simply don't have.
It reminds me of that quote. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Except in this case, the best time to deploy climate solutions is now, not after we've spent another decade researching speculative fixes.
I like that analogy. And here's another way to think about it. If your house is on fire, you don't stop to design an experimental fire extinguisher. You use the ones you already have on hand, and you call the fire department.
Exactly! So what should our listeners take away from this discussion? What's the actionable insight here?
I think it's about being skeptical of technological silver bullets for complex societal problems. When you hear about exciting new climate technologies, ask questions. Has this been proven to work at scale? What are the governance implications? And most importantly, is this distracting us from solutions we already know work?
And maybe there's a lesson here about how funding models shape the solutions we pursue. The venture capital approach works great for software startups, but maybe not so well for addressing climate change, which requires steady, incremental progress on multiple fronts.
Absolutely. Different challenges require different approaches. Not everything needs to be, or can be, disrupted by technology.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, Yakov. As always, we hope our listeners found this breakdown helpful and thought-provoking. If you're working on climate solutions, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this tension between proven technologies and speculative fixes.
And remember, while geoengineering research continues, there's nothing stopping us from scaling up the solutions we already have. Sometimes the most innovative approach is simply to deploy what works, at scale, right now.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's all for this episode of Innovation Pulse. I'm Donna, along with Yakov Lasker, thanking you for listening. Until next time.
Yakov Lasker signing off. Until next time, peace. We've explored the latest advancements in fusion energy at the National Ignition Facility, as well as the evolving landscape of autonomous vehicles and Tesla's innovative approach to robo-taxis. Meanwhile, we delved into the complexities of geoengineering and its role in climate change solutions, emphasizing the need for a balanced approach alongside proven technologies. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.